Dave, founder of Halloween Year Round, and today I'm ranking all 5 Captain America movies and TV miniseries in the MCU from my least favorite to my most favorite. Couple of things to get out of the way. I am not going to be considering or ranking the 1990 TV movie nor the 2 TV movies from the late 70s, early 80s. I considered doing them. I really did. I've seen them. They're charming and fun and cheesy and very much products of their time. They were made on TV movie budgets in those years. And I didn't want to just rag on them because I knew they were going to end up being in last place only because of just technically how they're put together and how TV movies were crafted back then. So I didn't really want to do that. Go check them out though. They're fun for what they are. I mean, Christopher Lee fights Captain America, and his shield looks like a little flimsy trash can lid made of plastic. What's not to love about that? But now that we're talking serious movies, let's get into the ranking. Number 5, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I have such mixed feelings about this show because, on the one hand, I really like what it does with Sam Wilson's character. It takes him on that full arc from sidekick to hero, and it's his journey of sort of accepting the shield and accepting that he is the new Captain America. Meanwhile, I really love what they do with Bucky and him kind of reconciling with his past and all the dark deeds he has done for Hydra. So there's a lot character-wise going into it. And John Walker, I know a lot of people didn't like him when he was first introduced. I think he's an interesting character, and in a lot of ways, not to get too political, he's a better representation of he's a representation of America the way that it is, whereas Steve Rogers was the representation of America what it strives to be. John Walker is a flawed hero, but I like that about him. It makes him relatable, it makes him interesting. And again, there's a lot this series had going for it. I wish it was a movie because with the 6 episodes, it does drag a bit, and you can tell that they're kind of just a couple episodes and a couple scenes feel like they're just filler. A couple subplots feel like they didn't really need to be there, but I also really like the way that it shows there were ramifications of the blip and then the return with the flag smashers and everything they talked about, and that just because half the world came back doesn't necessarily mean it was better for all of them, and that as much as we don't want to admit it, maybe the world was better for the half that survived because maybe Thanos was right all along, and that's an uncomfortable thing to think about, and it forces you to think about it. All that being said, there's a lot of problems with it too. Obviously, they had to rewrite the whole thing because, there was a real life pandemic, and that was one of the plot points. So you can kind of tell that it's being Frankenstein's monster stitched together. Plus, we do all this build up to Sam Wilson becoming Captain America just for his big Captain America moment to be a speech saying, do better. So this is a show that I don't dislike, and I'm going to say this up front because this is the last on the list. I don't dislike any of these. But if we're talking all the Captain America properties, the movies are better, and they're paced better, they're written better. There's just this was a great. This was a fine show. It was a fine show. I liked WandaVision and Loki better, but this was a fine show that did take the MCU forward, and I'm glad I watched it, but it was tough getting through some of it to rewatch it for this list. Number 4, Captain America: Brave New World. I just did a full review of this movie, so I'll post a link to that in the description. So I'm not going to get too into detail here or too into spoilers. A little bit into spoilers, but hey, the marketing campaign already spoiled it. Why did you give away the reveal of Red Hulk? This whole movie, it's weird because it's supposed to be Sam Wilson's shining moment as Captain America, but I feel like we got that in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and this movie he just kind of is that, so it doesn't really leave much room for him to have an arc other than should I not take the serum. The one who really has the arc here is Thunderbolt Ross. And Harrison Ford is amazing in it. I know he's old, I know he's grumpy, but he's still a movie star, and he proves that even at his age in his early 80s, he's still got it. He brings everything, and his sort of, for lack of a better term, grumpy, rough exterior kind of fits the character perfectly. And in it is an interesting exploration about taking ownership and taking responsibility for our mistakes, for our misdeeds, both on a personal level for Ross, but also on a national level, being that he's president. That being said, uh, not everything works. Yes, it was rewritten and reshot to hell, and it shows it's a bit messy. Sam feels like he's sidelined in his own movie. Giancarlo Esposito doesn't really need to be there, and it's just kind of there because he's Giancarlo Esposito. I like Samuel Stearns as the villain, even though he looks just like Victor Pascal in Pet Cemetery, and it was hard for me not to think of that the entire time I saw him on screen. But I do like that it's kind of a sequel to The Incredible Hulk that we never got. So I don't hate this movie. I don't even dislike this movie. I like it. I just don't love it. Number three, Captain America, the First Avenger. We're now getting to the movies that I really, really like. I don't quite love this one. I'm sorry. Cap was my least favorite character going in to the first Avengers from phase one. And it's because of this movie. Not that I dislike his character, I just think he's the least interesting. He was the sort of everyman, idealistic hero, and then he becomes that. And I feel like the movie takes way too long for him to become Captain America. And then when it does, it's mostly Steve Rogers talking about his ideals. That being said, Joe Johnston does a great job of creating this like pulp 90s aesthetic of World War II, even though I prefer the much grittier Saving Private Ryan version of World War II. I get it. It's a comic movie. You can't do that. That's just my own personal issue. But I like that it does a lot of world building and makes you feel like you're part of and you're in that world. Love Hugo Weaving as Red Skull. Love Tommy Lee Jones as the Colonel. There's a lot I like about the first Avenger. I like the idea of like, what is a hero? Is it more heroic for him to be doing these USO shows and raising money with war bonds or actually fighting on the field? The sort of difference between the ideal and the sort of sanitized Hollywood version of war and the real version of war that he goes into. I just think that the two sequels did a little bit better of a job, and I think that it took a little time to win me over that Steve Rogers he's a good person, but it took time for me to win me over for him being an interesting character. Number two, Captain America Civil War. I feel weird about this one because, yes, it's a great movie. Yes, it is the sort of uh, uh, epitome of everything that is Captain America, freedom versus security, the Avengers torn. But that's just it. It's secretly an Avengers movie. So I feel like if I'm ranking like what are my favorite team up movies, obviously this one ranks higher. But as just a Captain America movie, I have to kind of put aside the Avenger stuff and just look at it as a Captain America movie. Now, as that, I really like it. Again, it brings in sort of the consequences and the real life complexities of that mission they do in the opening that results in the Wakandans being killed. Shows how messy real life politics and real life military operations can be. That there is unfortunate collateral damage, and what do you do about that collateral damage? I love how Cap is willing to put everything on the line like he did in Winter Soldier, which I'll get to. He's willing to put all that on the line to stand up for what he believes in. The only thing I don't really like about this movie that never worked for me, I don't think you need Zemo. I get the whole, get them to fight each other and tear each other apart. And yes, Tony having that moment of realization that not only has Bucky killed his parents, but Cap knew about it and didn't tell him is a gut wrenching, dramatic moment. But I think the movie's themes work better without that if they're just fighting over the ideas of it. And I think that his inclusion to get it's like we already had them fight, but now we want them to fight and make it personal. And my other big issue with it is you don't really have any major consequences other than, yes, Rhodey gets injured, but then he's walking with like braces in the next one, and then by the time we see him in Falcon and Winter Soldier, it's like nothing ever happened to him. I we saw the collateral damage with the civilians being killed in the opening operation where they're getting crossbones, but we never really see the Avengers suffer any collateral damage, and I think that would have made it hit that much harder, forcing Cap to be like, okay, if you're going to stand up for these ideals and if you're going to be the rebel and fight for it, people you love are going to get hurt as a result and maybe die as a result. And it still wants to Disneyfy it and not go all the way with that. And finally, number one, Captain America, the Winter Soldier. I worked at Regal when this came out back in 2014. And one of my coworkers saw it opening night. I was working the concession stand. And he's like, Dave, you got to check out Winter Soldier. It's as good as Avengers. And I'm like, no, really? Come on. You have to remember, at that point, the only sequels, post Avengers we had was Iron Man 3 and Thor the Dark World. So I'm like, really? Because actually, I'm kind of not crazy about these post Avengers sequels. I don't know that the MCU is going to work in a post Avengers world, or at least I don't know that the solo movies are going to work. And this movie showed that you could. First Avenger had Steve Rogers talking about what he believed in. Winter Soldier has him standing up for and defending what he believes in. Being willing to be the rebel, willing to go on the run, willing to go up against S.H.I.E.L.D. and, well, Hydra and Alexander Pierce because he knows it's the right thing to do. The whole Captain's Orders speech he gives at the end is one of the most moving speeches for me in any comic book movie. The scene where the desk guy is like, "No, I'm not gonna launch those ships," reminds us of the courage of the little guy in the face of oppression, and it's just a powerful movie. I love that it's secretly like a '70s political spy thriller, especially with the casting of Robert Redford, and I love how practical everything is. Yes, obviously the helicarriers are CGI, but in a franchise that even at that time was just green screen, CGI everything, I love that the ambush scene for Nick Fury, most of that is practical. The cars hitting each other and the chase and the fight scenes, it feels more grounded and thus you every punch you feel even more. I love the conspiracy of it because again, it goes in line with that '70s, political spy thriller. And I love the reveal of Bucky. I was someone who wasn't familiar with the comics. That took me by surprise. And the idea that he has to go up against his friend again, backing up his ideals and fighting for what is right. If First Avenger introduced Steve Rogers, Winter Soldier perfected him as a character, and it's the movie that made him go from my least favorite character in the franchise to my most favorite character in the franchise, and remains so to this day. But hey, these are just my rankings. This is just my channel. Let me know in the comments, what are your least to most favorite Captain America movies and TV show? Have you seen the other ones from 1990 and the '70s? I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. If you don't, you may end up getting frozen and only thawed out for deadly missions where they reveal a bunch of words in Russian and make you kill Tony Stark's parents against your will. And as always, every day is Halloween.